Welcome to episode 104 of the Necronama.com. Well, my work here is done.
Hi, I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And we got a treat for you. We don't just have Gemma Amor on the show. We've got Brandon Boone with us. And we're going to be talking about Suspiria. I want to welcome both of you to the show.
Hello.
Hey.
Now, I joked with Gemma before we started. And I said, Gemma Amor is somebody who does not need an introduction. And she jokingly changed her ID to this call to needs no introduction. So, Madam needs no introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where any of the guests, any of the viewers and listeners who may have been checking out the show previously or not checked it out previously know you from, and just give us a rundown of who you are and then why you chose this film.
Okay, so I'm Gemma. I am a Bram Stoker Award nominated horror author. Not traditionally. In the last couple of years, I've been mainly kind of indie and self-published. And I also write for a number of horror fiction anthology podcasts, most notably the No Sleep podcast and another very cool show called Shadows at the Door, which some of you may or may not have heard. I am also a kind of book cover artist and sometime voice actor. And I have been on this particular podcast twice before to talk about Hereditary and to talk about Scare Me, which was a lot of fun. So I think we came by this movie because Brandon, who does need introduction, is a horror music composer. I'll let him talk about himself. But I think James and I and Brandon were originally talking about kind of coming on together. It was with a view to kind of discussing horror music and scores in movies, which I think is something that Necronomy hasn't really covered that much before. Mm-hmm. And we were thinking Suspiria would be a really good one, mostly because the music's written by Thom Yorke, and Brandon really aspires to be Thom Yorke and doesn't ever really quite get there. And I really enjoyed making fun of him for that. Yeah.
I think I should play Can't We Be Friends? Can we be friends like in the background, or Houdini's friends? How many of us have them? Well, Brandon, welcome to the show. This is your first time on. Hopefully it will not be the last time. You might say it's going to be the last time with Gemma, but but tell us about yourself. Tell the listeners about who you are, where they might know you from, or where they could, get some of your work.
Well, thank you for having me on. Yeah, my name is Brandon, and I'm I'm not really a horror composer per se, but I'm a media composer, most notably known for horror. You've heard my music on the No Sleep podcast, and I have also done some video games, other podcasts, and film, and some short films and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about Thom Yorke's music in Suspiria, as much as it pains me to do so in front of Gemma.
You need to tell them which video games as well. There's a really cool game.
Yeah. The one that is out so far is Scarlet Hollow, and it's on Steam right now. The first episode's free. And then an upcoming video game called Realm Weaver will feature some of my music.
Awesome. I'm writing those down because I'm like, all right, go back on Steam. And
Scarlet Hollow is really good.
Scarlet Hollow is great.
It's I don't know that I'm not very good with gaming and terminology, but it's like a
visual
kind of
novel. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, mysterious kind of haunted town that this girl travels back to for a funeral, and you interact with lots of different cool characters, and it's illustrated by Abby Howard, who's a giant in kind of horror illustration and cool kooky creatures, and you just look her up on Twitter and her stuff's incredible. So it's a really atmospheric game. I'm doing your job for you, Brandon. I knew this would happen.
Well, I knew you'd do it better than me, so I'm just letting you.
I don't even get paid for this shit. I don't get paid for this. I really just need to reassess my friendship, don't I?
But yes,
that's what friendship is
on
about.
Steam, it's awesome. Abby is an incredible artist, and the game's a lot of fun, cool. And it's kind of like a choose your own adventure in a way. where, there's like different romance options depending on what characters you talk to and different storylines that you can follow. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'm glad that those are starting to come back, because that was a big thing in my childhood, where the choose your own adventure books.
Yeah.
But you've seen a lot more video games bringing that format forward, where they have, not necessarily open world games, but you have those games where it's, I guess, driven by your consequence driven, or
Sure.
just the butterfly effect that you may have by choosing left versus right. Or door
that was always the good thing about the books, though, was if you cocked it up and made the wrong decision, you could just go back 3 chapters and decide again. And it's like, I feel like that didn't really set me up for life. I didn't realize that if you make the wrong decision, you can't go back 3 chapters and change your mind. You have to just live with it.
I'm so bad. It gives me so much anxiety thinking about reading the old Goosebump Choose Your Own Adventures. And it's like, I remember choosing where I want to go and then almost immediately checking what the other option was just to see. Yeah.
It's like when you're in a restaurant and you order something and then you immediately regret what you've ordered, and the other person ends up with the meal that you actually wanted, but you weren't brave enough to order. And you just, like, your decision-making process. I'm not very good at making important decisions.
But you learn for the next time that you go to that restaurant.
That's true.
And unless they change the menu, you see, life is a series of ever changing menus based on seasonal products, Don, and I feel like we should take that as a life lesson.
I was worried you were going to say life is a cabaret, and I was going to. I'm like, that's a great segue.
I like that film, though. It's a good score.
All right. Well, I guess we should, jump into the film.
Well, I've actually watched it and done my homework and written notes and stuff. I imagine Brandon's just looked at the pictures on IMDb and pretended that he knew what it was about. But I think
I looked at the images on Google.
Oh, did you? Well done. You can't talk about this movie, I think, without talking about the music, but also like the underlying themes, which, again, I seem to come on the show and talk about and inadvertently or deliberately choose movies that are very female oriented in theme. And this is a movie very much about women and motherhood and sisterhood and kind of all those things beyond the kind of supernatural witchy coven shit. So I don't know how. I think maybe it's better to go through chronologically, perhaps, and just do the movie like that, and then those things will kind of organically, like, is percolate the right word? When you percolate your cup of coffee, it naturally drizzles down into the cup.
What is happening?
I don't know, but you know what I mean. Like,
we got you.
Yeah. Okay.
The conversation will bubble and sift through.
Indeed, and we'll get the lovely wafty scent of fresh coffee as we talk. Before all of that, though, I think this is a really good opportunity for me to kind of just talk about how much I love Tilda Swinton.
Well, there are movies that she's in that I only watch or I only enjoyed because of her. So, Burn After Reading, I didn't.
Oh God, I hated that movie.
No,
I hated that.
I only liked it because of her performance. That one scene where, she hears all these noises through the house and it's just her like looking up and across. And you're just sitting there thinking about how aggravated she must be in that moment.
Every time I see that movie, I've seen it twice now, once by mistake, once on purpose. And, there's a scene in Family Guy when they're having a blackout and they're talking about a movie, and I can't remember what it is, but like they're talking about how much Peter Griffin is talking about how much he doesn't like it. And he's like, it insists upon itself, Lois. It insists upon itself. And I'm like, that is how I feel about that film.
It definitely does. It definitely does, because when you're at the end of it, it's
tries.
Kind of like,
It just tries so hard, and it doesn't seem to get anywhere. And I know I'm not really one for kind of being super critical of things I don't like. I'd prefer to talk about the things I do like. But that's one film that always really kind of makes me quite cross, because I feel like I invested loads in it and it didn't take me anywhere or pay me at the end. But she was amazing in it. She was.
Well, you get to see her twice as much in Hail Caesar, so.
I haven't seen that, actually. That's something I haven't seen.
It's decent. I think if you can get beyond, I guess, your dislike of Burn After Reading, because I believe it's the Coen brothers directed that film as well. There's a lot going on in that movie, and Tilda Swinton plays twin characters in the film. And you sit there like she does it so well to where even as a viewer, you're like, which one is this?
But she's incredible, right? Like she's like, as soon as you see this movie and you see
Klemperer.
The first scene opens with Klempner, the psychologist, interviewing Chloe Grace Moretz, and forget her name, I think Patricia. She plays Patricia. And I sat there for about 5 minutes and I was like, there's something not quite right with this guy, but I couldn't figure out what it is. You know? And then I was like, oh shit, that's Tilda Swinton. And then you see her in a different role, and then you see her again at the end, and it's like, that's 3 roles in one movie.
Right.
The thing I was reading about that, like, because I wanted to double check that it was actually her and it wasn't an old guy that just looked like her. But you can tell about the eyes with prosthetics and aging makeup. Sometimes you can just tell. And I was reading about the fact that she kind of basically pranked people with this movie by not telling anybody that she was playing this character, and they had a false character. They set up like an IMDb profile for him and stuff. And that what she wanted was to kind of, in the editing process, just like basically insinuate that he died, rather than admit that it was her. But it kind of, somebody leaked it. But I love that. She's really mischievous. And somebody in an interview asked her, like, why do you want to do this? And she was like, well, why not?
Exactly.
I just thought, yeah, that's cool. She seems fun. I like Tilda. I've got a lot of time for Tilda.
So you'd figured out she was, is it Klemperer? Is that his name?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Klemperer.
You figured that out during the movie then?
Yeah, with about 5 minutes in.
Because I saw the movie in theaters with friends when it first came out, and I knew something was off about his character, but it wasn't until after the movie we like went out to get ice cream or something, and my friends were like, that was Tilda Swinton, right? I was like, what? Yeah, and she was Mother Marco too. What? Like, I had no idea. I was just baffled by it.
It's cool though, right? And they had to thicken out her jaw and age her skin and stuff, but when she's moving around in the movie and the way she walks, like, she's studied old age, I think,
right.
And just she's a method actor, I guess, in the sense that she fully immerses herself in. But can you imagine, like, directing Tilda Swinton and like, right, do Mother Marco, right, do right. What's her name, Blanc, do Blanc, Madame Blanc, now do Klemperer, and like, imagine switching from it boggles my mind. And she's
I was gonna say, I imagine her sitting in a chair with getting makeup put on for 4 hours or whatever helps her transition.
It's insane. And like, and it's not just the fact that because she's quite, she sort of defies gender anyway, I think, which is another thing I really like about her. And you see her in different movies, and she's quite often quite sort of fluid in how she comes across with gender. And I think that's a deliberate choice. And the diversity of the roles that she takes on. But she's also, with some people, you can just tell there's a real heightened sense of intelligence there. And when she speaks languages, she's obviously learned it for the movie. She speaks French and German in this, but it sounds like she could probably already speak French and German. And like, I'm probably mythologizing her a bit and putting her on a pedestal. But I remember the first time I kind of sat up and really took note of her was in We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a devastating book. And I didn't think a movie could do it justice at all, by Leonor Shriver. And I watched the movie, and she personified that character, who's an incredibly unlikable character. But she gave her huge empathy and understanding. And I think it takes a degree of intelligence to do that. And it's just, there's something about anything she's in, when she's on the screen, she's a bit like Cate Blanchett in the sense that your eye stays with her, to the point sometimes where I didn't actually watch some of the other characters in this movie as much as I should have done, because it's all about Tilda, like she's distracting. Like,
oh, most definitely. I mean, she definitely, as you said, she draws the eye. And for me, as far as I was concerned, she could have played Dakota Johnson's role.
I said Dakota Fanning yesterday. It's very different.
Because I would have loved to have seen this moment at the end where, I don't know, she transformed into her. You know, how Mother Marco was saying, like, oh, I will absorb you, and I will, there'll be nothing left of you except for me. And and how Tilda Swinton's character, Madame Blanc, says, "Hey, you must be willing. If you have any doubt, this isn't going to work. You can leave right now. I'll take the memories away from you. It'll be cool." And I was just thinking, like, is she gonna turn into? Is it going to be revealed that this is actually her in a different plane, and this is some bloodline or whatever was going on? Because the callbacks and the imagery and all these things that were thrown in as far as what's going through, what's being brought up in the past from Susanna's head, you're questioning all forms of reality that are going on, and I just. It kind of like we talked about it with Hereditary in a previous episode with you, Gemma, and there are a couple other movies that have tackled this as where you get this image from someone's head or inside of someone's head or from their dreams or sometimes from artistic representations that they bring into the film, and you start to question, is this the real story that I'm following? Is this, is there reality, or at least is their concept of reality what reality actually is? So
I think that's why Klemperer is written in, because I don't know about you, but I got to the end of the movie, and because it's set in acts and there's like a prologue and an epilogue and 7 acts or whatever, and the Klemperer kind of wraparound story, I didn't really see much. It didn't add much to the narrative for me, and I kind of got to the end and this sort of mention of the concentration camps and the Second World War stuff, I thought was kind of superfluous to the story, and it wasn't really that necessary.
Right.
But I understand, I think, why it's there, and I think it's there to sort of ground you in reality a little bit more. So because everything's really claustrophobic and everything's set inside the dance academy and you don't really move around that much. But there are scenes where Klemperer is involved, where he travels and he goes to his house in the countryside, or he's in his office, and it just brings you back down to earth a little bit. And I think that's probably what his role is. Because I don't know about you, but there's the big scene at the end. We're kind of doing this back to front and not chronological at all, but the scene at the end where everything kind of goes Pete Tong and batshit crazy, and Klemperer's been kidnapped to kind of be part of the weird witchy ritual, and he's lying there naked with his fake dangly bits. Apparently she wore throughout the whole movie, and I just felt like that for me didn't work, because the movie for me was about women and it was about the female characters. But I think what you're saying about the abstract and the reality, that's what Klemperer was for me. He represented the kind of day-to-day stuff, like he had his suit and he ate his soup and he went and sat in the countryside, and he was very normal and solid, whereas everything else was so strange and weird.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, because my question that I wrote down on my list was, about Dr. Joseph Klemperer. I was like, why are you here? And for me, it was like, why are you here after Patricia's scene? Like, other than to say, there's something happening at this school, there's all this, and he's diagnosing her with delirium. So it could have been easily accepted in the story that somebody was trying to reach out for help. This guy was a psychiatrist and thought that she was crazy. And then boom, there's nothing else. There's no other connection. That's really all the audience needs to see, as far as Patricia shows up to go get help and talk about what she's seeing, is dismissed, and then she goes missing. And then now we've got Susie's character, where then as an audience member, you're questioning like, oh, what the hell is going on here? What is really going on here? And just when Patricia says something about, they're witches, and that can easily be written off by a viewer by saying like, oh, well, maybe she is crazy because I'm seeing it through his eyes. Maybe she is nuts. She's acting so erratic. He
writes down in his book, that she has this kind of constructive mythology, and then he writes down simulacrum, which is a word I can never say. And there are other notes and stuff, but you can see I think in his mind, so there's a lot of political turmoil going on in the background in Berlin. It's like the German autumn, which I knew nothing about until I researched it for this interview, because I do my homework, Brandon. So there's like there's this backdrop of the German autumn, which was kind of like a load of events all in a short period of time. Don's probably better versed in kind of history than I am, but to do with like the kidnap and the murder of this massive industrialist guy called Hans Schleyer. And then there was like a hijacked plane, and there was the murder of someone else. And there was just a series of things that all happened within a short period of time that are either like the far left or the kind of free Palestine kind of militarists. I can't use the right word. And it's interesting because he immediately, when Patricia goes in, I think he immediately, or the implication is that he immediately assumes she's maybe involved in some side political terrorist kind of group, and she's using this dance troupe as a kind of her fantasies and stuff. Do you know what I mean? She's in this heightened state of fear, and she's using that as a front or an excuse or a psychological excuse for kind of her nefarious activities. And that's why he calls the police, because he wonders whether she's been sucked into some kind of reactionary group. And then the police go there and are kind of frozen in time and laughed at while they're stripped naked, which is all a bit weird. But it's like, it felt like that was there as a convenient cover, and that's why the Coven and this dance academy have existed in Berlin for so long, and they're still there because they can kind of hide behind all this unrest. And if 3 or 4 girls go missing from this academy, no one's really going to notice because of how much turmoil there is going on in the streets at the time, you know, like
right,
easily shrugged off. They joined the revolution or whatever. They joined
exactly, and they've gone from like the Second World War to kind of post-war Germany to whatever was happening in the 60s and 70s. It's like this huge period of turmoil and trauma, which is sort of touched on with Klemperer at the end when we find out what happens to his missing wife. And it's just, maybe I think that's like a red herring, a kind of bracketing red herring that you think is going to have some influence on the story. And actually, at its heart, it's just a group of power-hungry witches kind of trying to sort out their hierarchy. That's all it really is. Which I
kind of have a slightly different opinion on Klemperer's purpose. And I don't know if you guys read into the same way as me, but I took it as throughout the movie, they kind of build sympathy for him because, you know, he's lost his wife and all of this. And I felt like at the end when Susie becomes Mother Suspirium, like it almost felt like a new era for this coven. And it was almost like, I feel like when she went to him at the end, it was almost like a sympathetic thing. Maybe, I don't know. To me, it felt like maybe it meant to come across in a way that this new era of Mother Suspirium instead of Mother Marcos is going to be different. You know what I mean? It's like it's a new regime, you know, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Which really ties in with what's happening in Germany at the same time. I think there's a real nice parallel there. And also because the witches have kind of lost their way a bit. They are just obsessed with power and cruelty. But when Mother Suspirium comes back, she's like a goddess, isn't she? She's not even a witch. She's like a higher power.
Right.
And there's an idea with deities in general, aren't they, that they're either chaotic or neutral, or they're both kind of fearsome and frightening, but also compassionate and mercy, like the idea of mercy. And she shows mercy to people as well as like astonishing power and control over death. So I think you're right. He's there as a kind of sympathetic foil. It's just amazing knowing that it was Tilda Swinton and just watching her act her fucking socks off. I just really enjoyed it under all that makeup.
I think it did. I think it just did a good job of, you know, when you finally see Mother Marcos, and like everything around Mother Marcos is death and, you know, slow decay and rot and everything. Whereas, you know, everything around Susie is kind of youth and beauty and all of this. It kind of it almost felt like this coven was going in the wrong direction, and this deity of Mother Suspirium had to intervene to stop what Mother Marcos was doing. I might be reading too much into that, but it just felt like, you know, that's why, you know, it did that, the cut scenes of like, you know, Marcos and then Marcos explosion, and killing off everyone who supported her in the voting process. It
was really rhythmic. I really liked that. And because earlier, like one of the witches I can't remember which way she voted, because we need to go back to the voting process, because that's like really nice framing device as well. But like, she kills herself, doesn't she? She kind of slices herself open with a knife,
right?
Because she doesn't like how, I guess, chaotic which direction the coven is kind of going in. And there are several moments where they're having dinner in a restaurant, or where you just, I know it's going to sound really dumb by comparison, but like, did you ever watch the Roald Dahl witches movie from like the 80s?
Oh yeah.
Or read the books and stuff, and they're having a big conference in a hotel, in a posh seaside hotel, which is really funny because those seaside hotels have got a really distinct shabby personality, like a holiday town vibe. So it kind of makes absolute sense that it's the root of all evil. But they're having this big conference, and there's a moment where they kind of take off their wigs and they've all got scabby heads, and they take off their shoes and they've got no toes, and they take off their gloves and they've all got clawed hands and stuff. And then they go through the motions of this conference, and then they all start cackling, and it's just utter chaos, right? And there are moments in this that really reflected that. I don't think on purpose, but that's how you feel witches should be, like bad witches should be. It's just cackly chaos and cruelty, and I thought that came across really, really well.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's it made me feel like the Mother Marcos, her coven was that typical witches are bad kind of thing, but with Mother Suspirium, it made me feel like, oh, maybe they're trying to say like witches don't have to be that.
Right, they're not one-dimensional.
Right.
They're so misunderstood.
Well, I think that's a good thing to bring in, because that's historically, when we look at it, witches are always, well, I guess I'll go back a little bit. There was some tweet or some social media post where the person was questioning and said, why were we taught to mistrust witches or vilified the witches and not the people that burned them or hanged them, executed them?
Right.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to this idea that we've been trained, and I'm going to say this from a gender and sexuality standpoint. We've been trained that and educated in a sense that women who stand out are problematic, right? Historically. So whether these women were doing good or doing bad with their witchcraft, it didn't matter, because they were doing something that was different. Whether it was, taking on the traditional patriarchal roles or institutions like when the police show up and ridiculing them, ridiculing them while they're naked and laughing at them.
Right.
Or just having there are no men that are associated with that dance troupe. From management, it doesn't seem like there's anybody as far as ownership, trainers, anything like that. So it seems as though that these women are able to express themselves freely in a society, and freely as dancers, in a society that's not allowing women to express themselves freely.
And it's so interesting to me as well. So the backstory there. So like, for anyone listening that hasn't seen it, the kind of overall storyline is of a young girl who comes from a really strict Amish upbringing, religious Mennonite upbringing, and deeply religious. She's not allowed to fantasize about traveling overseas. She has to study American history. She's not allowed to think about sex or masturbate or do any of that stuff. She just lives in an incredibly locked down, like aggressive, controlling environment. And then when her mother, I assume it's her mother, dies, which kind of starts off the whole theme of motherhood, and the kind of perverted version of it that she's experienced so far. Like, there are things like when she's caught being naughty in the cupboard with herself, like her mother captures her and irons her hand, and just stuff like that. It's really abusive. And she moves to this dance academy and finds a new family. And the parallels between the kind of religiosity and the cult nature of the family that she grew up in, or cultish nature. I've got to be really careful because I don't want to be dismissive of any particular religious sect or upbringing, but it's just that there is a sense that you get of her upbringing, that it's been incredibly constrained in a way that you see often in cults and religious cults. And then the idea of a coven, which is essentially another type of cult, right? They all have a belief system and an ideology, and they practice rituals. Like, rituals are littered throughout this movie in everything they do, in the meals they sit down and have together. Like, even when Klemperer is interviewing Patricia right at the very beginning, like the second scene, opening scene, before he'll talk to her, he has like his notebook that he'll get ready and his pen that he'll get ready, and like things he'll do ritualistically before he'll face her and talk to her. So I just thought it was really interesting how like the practice of growing up religious and the kind of the juxtaposition with that and living in a witch's coven, and worshipping a different structure, because they've got this structure of like three goddesses, haven't they?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I just thought it was really, really interesting how that was done and compared. And I thought the play against those two things, because you chop backwards and forwards between her upbringing and what's happening at the moment, in that way where you're not really quite sure what's coming next and what reality actually is. And it's so what Brandon was saying about in the end where she becomes Mother Suspiria. Is that when she becomes it, or has she always been? Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I think
it's open to interpretation.
She always has been, like, or that was like, I think that was her becoming Mother Suspiria, but there was like a prophecy set in motion, from when she was a kid.
And is she more receptive to that because of her upbringing? And do you know what I mean? Like, is she a better vessel for that because she's experienced something similar or not? There's a lot of stuff there to unpack that I kind of really need to rewatch and think about again.
Because how old, when it shows her as a kid and like studying, how old do you think she was there?
Probably about like
6 or 7.
8 years old, something like that.
And all she's doing is drawing lines from Ohio to Berlin. Like, she's already being drawn to this coven at that age. No 6-year-old kid in that day knows what Berlin is. Right.
Well, she's seen the dance academy. She tells Madame Blanc later that she goes to see the dance academy several times when they're touring, I think. And so she's always had an awareness of them and been drawn to them, which is why she's really insistent on auditioning at the beginning. And the kind of one of the women sort of teases her and says, normally we wouldn't audition someone like you because you've got no dance experience, but you wouldn't let us say no. So she's insistent that she wants to go to this school. And that's kind of implied that maybe there is some background knowledge or like some destiny or fate, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why it felt like throughout the movie, Susie has the approval of Madame Blanc and Madame Blanc only. It seems like the rest of the teachers who are, or staff or whatever, who are, clearly team Marco, they're sensing something and like pushing away, Susie.
Yeah. And she gets really maternal over her towards the end, which is why she gets really conflicted, right? And probably why she's saved as well as a character, because I thought she was a goner. And then there's that lovely, that lovely moment where you realize that although her head has been entirely decapitated almost, if you just
severed,
just flip it back on like a Pez dispenser, she just comes to life again.
Right.
But maybe she's saved because she is the sympathetic one, and she is more of a kind of proper mother than Susie's ever had before.
Right.
So that's not an Amish religion. So someone explain that religious.
Oh, the Mennonites. And I know we're probably going to catch up because they make reference to the Amish and talk about how there was a separation between the Amish and the Mennonites as far as, from what I understand about Mennonites, without Google assisting me at all, is that Mennonites aren't as strict with things like technology and whatever as the Amish are, or even as strict when it comes to I guess leisure time, because I've seen Mennonites out and about when I was in Virginia and Georgia, even here in Mississippi. I've seen them out and about, and they take advantage of some of the modern conveniences. I mean, not doing everything that we would do. I would say everything that non-Mennonites would do. but they're definitely partaking in stuff that the Amish don't traditionally do.
Right.
Okay.
With regard to technology.
Yeah, I've definitely seen my fair share of Mennonites living in Ohio, and it's you'll see them. Like you said, it's exactly what you said. I think it's more they just acknowledge modern conveniences more than maybe the Amish who stay in the old ways.
Right. And if I remember, if I may be wrong about this, somebody can correct me later. But I know from my travels into Pennsylvania Dutch country that the Amish or the Pennsylvania Dutch do not allow phones or modern technology inside the home, but they can partake in modern technology outside of the home to an extent. So there are phones that are accessible to them, but they cannot be inside the home. And even when it came to vehicles, which some had, these were the kind of the old Model T, Model A. You can crank it to start it, but I saw so few of them that it wasn't a thing that so many people were interested in because you still had access to the horse and buggies.
Right.
I think the technology thing is really important with this movie as well. And I've said this before with horror movies, like modern technology, unless you really fully embrace it, like in a zeitgeist way, like the kind of host people have done and so on. Technology is an issue in horror movies because it immediately it removes a level of isolation and threat.
Right.
Yeah.
That if something weird is going on and there's a witch doing something strange in a dance studio, like these days there'd be somebody around kind of streaming it on Twitch or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like it would just immediately remove like the immediacy of the situation and the sense of fear associated with it. And I wonder whether, because this is a remake of the Argento movie, I was thinking about why he chose that particular period and that particular country and that specific time frame. I wonder whether some of that is the wanting to keep technology out of it and keep it quite minimal in that sense, so that you don't have to think about those things as well. I don't know how deliberate that was.
Does the original take place at the same time period?
Well, it was made in the same time period, wasn't it? It was like
So
70 something.
Right, so it would have been like a modern day while they were.
Yeah. I can't remember when the original was made. I'm showing my colours now.
It was in 77, I think.
Yeah, so isn't this set in 77? So I wonder whether that's a deliberate like homage to.
Yeah.
I can't pronounce the director's name very well without stumbling, but it's Luca Guadagnino. Is that? I think that's right. Apologies to anyone offended by that.
Sorry, Luca.
If you're listening. So I wanted to go because I know we need to talk about the music
yes,
as a
definitely.
kind of separate entity in this, but I didn't. I want to. Brandon is way better placed than me to kind of bang on about that boring stuff. But I wanted to.
Thank you as always.
Just going back to kind of Tilda Swinton, and I think she's also quite a musically grounded person. So I also, one of my favorite kind of writing albums to listen to is Max Richter's Blue Notebooks album. And Tilda features on about 4 tracks or 5 tracks where she's just very gently narrating some rather nice prose over the top of Max Richter's music. It's, about memories of going home and about trees and spring and new life and all that stuff. And it's quite meditative. And I think she's probably got quite a sort of strong connection in that sense with big musical things as well, projects.
Sure.
I need to sort of dig into it a bit more, but I thought that was a nice link because for me this is a movie about themes, but with the decision to kind of hire Thom Yorke and use his music, it's a musical showcase, like, and I guess that's sort of ties in with the dance, and that's what I felt it was. Like I watched it last night and my husband, I kind of told my husband loosely what it was about. And it was about these witches in Berlin in whatever time frame. And he was like, oh, right, fine. We started watching it and he just looked at me and he went, it's about interpretive dance. He was really unimpressed. Probably fell asleep. So, but it is about dance and it is about movement and it is about music. And I think it would be really a shame not to just explore that music, like properly sink our teeth into it. So that's did you like that? Did you like how I did that? I set that up as a little segue.
Very, very nice segue.
Yeah, I'm going to throw the burning ball at you.
Well, I think it's funny because I remember my friends telling me after we saw the movie that the original Suspiria doesn't have that amount of dance. It's like way less about the actual dancing. So I think that's a really good take on this one, is that they really leaned into that, like the interpretive dance and everything. So I think that's one way that it's different than the original.
I think it's meant to be really different to the original in terms of how abstract it is as well. I don't think the original is that abstract. We should point out for the listeners that none of us have seen the original.
We have not.
So,
I've tried, and it is hard to track down on streaming services.
you don't watch anything unless it's streaming. You don't rent movies at all. Like, it's so infuriating, Don. So like Brandon and I have known each other a couple of years, and we're kind of reasonably good friends when I don't hate him. And we have this like open document of movies. I keep saying, have you seen this film? And he'll be like, no, never seen it. And I'm not kidding. It's like every film apart from this one and Mortal Kombat. Have you seen this film? Nope, never seen it. And so this open document has got about 400 movies on it, but he won't watch them unless they're on streaming services. And I get so annoyed. It's like, rent the movie. It's just available to rent.
All right, I want access to this list. I want to see this list.
It's a long, long list. I think a couple of the entries towards the end are like, do you even read this list? I don't think you do. Why am I wasting my time? This makes me so upset and empty inside.
It's more therapeutic for Gemma than anything to make this list and be angry at me for not watching.
He does that. Does that thing where he's just like nods and smiles and lets me have my like little rant and then does nothing about it whatsoever.
On this list is just like links to like rent for $3.99 on YouTube. You know, every single one.
It's because it's worth it though. Like there's some good movies on that list.
And what I've learned from Gemma, at least in the year that I've been in conversation with her, she doesn't give bad recommendations.
I don't. I actually have really good taste in movies. Like I have bad taste in other things, but I have good taste in booze and movies.
Yeah, because the first time when I first saw Hereditary, which again is one of the movies I would recommend to go along with this film.
Yeah.
When I first saw it, I was like, I didn't really feel it. But I watched it the second time. I was like, it's a little bit better. And then, Gemma said, hey, I want to cover this film on the show. Watched it the third time. I said, okay, now I'm getting a lot more stuff because I missed these little pieces here and there. It's not a movie that you can watch once and let go. You have to see it again. And I would say the same thing with this film for some people who would be turned off and say, oh, well, not to pick on your husband, Gemma, but if he's like, oh, it's about interpretive dance or it's about this, that's one thing you can get out of it. But if you watch the entire film and then you go back, you start to see these pieces coming together. And even now, I was writing in my notes, it was like dancing, the links that it had, the link that it had to witchcraft, even in the New England colonies.
Yeah.
That whole idea of, if you read or watched The Crucible or Three Sovereigns, stuff like that, you see how even the court records, not just, even beyond just the literary world, the court records talk about how these women were suspected of witchcraft because they were dancing naked, or they were dancing, and even within voodoo, as far as like the Louisiana and Gulf Coast area, there is a specific dance that's done. It's called the snake dance, that was done by priestesses down there that was linked to their witchcraft. And it was kind of like, hey, if somebody's doing the snake dance, you got to be careful because there could be a sacrifice. There could be this that's happening. And of course, there was a lot of things that were steeped in mythology or misunderstanding. But
dance has been so important to like human culture for thousands of years, right? We have war dances. Like you go and watch an All Blacks rugby match and you watch them do the haka. And that's essentially a kind of ritualized form of aggressive dance to intimidate the enemy. And there's wedding dances and waltzes and marches, and like all of this stuff has come from, I think, a core desire as humans to express ourselves with our bodies physically, right? Like we've all been there. We've all been clubbing. Maybe we haven't all been clubbing, but like I've been clubbing when I was young, and I've done the drugs and the drinking and the house music, and you get into a trance-like state if you give yourself entirely to it. There have been nights where I've danced and I've kind of lost time, and you like wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go, oh shit, everyone's going home. And it's crazy how good it makes your body feel. And I wonder how many thousands of years people have been dancing and associated that with like magical powers or energy, or like, it just makes total sense to me that those two things are linked. And it's in so many movies about witches. It's like, even in Witch at the end, like they're all kind of dancing in the air, aren't they? In a big circle kind of in the air and stuff. And like you said, Crucible, and it just, there's something mesmerizing about rhythm. And I wonder whether it's rhythm that sounds magical in the sense of like reciting a spell, or there's a component of ritual and pace and rhythm and communing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's a way to communicate.
Making sense, but
no, you're making perfect sense. I mean, it's a way of communicating. It's also, as you said, it's a way of expressing yourself, because even animals dance. I mean, if you look at, I found this out years ago. I thought it was like the coolest little fact there was. Bees do a dance to let other bees know where the flowers are to pollinate.
They do a bum wiggle, don't they? I've seen it. It's adorable. They do this little like rattly bum wiggle. It's really cute.
And like it's human nature, but it's animalistic and primal as well. So it's I think what it really comes down to for some people who are opposed to dance, because there are people who are in religions that are opposed to dancing and music and expressing themselves that way, is maybe it is that fear of the dance causes you to not necessarily lose your bearings, but it allows you to be somewhat susceptible to other types of influence, whether that's as Susie, has in one of her conversations where she says to Madame Blanc, like, oh, is this what it feels like to fuck? And
yeah, I thought that was an interesting scene, because she's still clearly a virgin as well, isn't she, in this movie? Yeah, which is obviously probably another reason why she's a good vessel. Like, she's unsullied.
Right.
But yeah, even things like rock and roll itself, the term for it came from, it basically meant that it was sexual music. Like, this is the music that you're going to listen to if you want to have sex.
And people were afraid of it, right?
Yes.
So like they responded to rock and roll the same way they responded to heavy metal, like when that was a thing. Like, people were afraid of it because they thought that people would behave in kind of negative ways or unrestrained ways. And do you know what I think like the root of it is like inherently humans who have been in a kind of constructed society for like many hundreds of years, we're afraid of freedom. Right. And I think music and dancing is freedom, right? Because you lose yourself in it, you express yourself fully. And there are so many people who are intimidated by freedom. It astonishes me now. You only have to look at, and we were talking earlier about, everything to do with what's going on in the world today. And there's people are being offered more freedoms if they do certain things, and they don't want it. They don't want it. They want to be constrained. Like, I think it's really fascinating how we associate true liberation with something very, very scary. Like, letting go of yourself completely is really scary for human beings. Animals don't really think about it. They just have basic functions, but humans are too self-aware, I think. And that's, I think, where music is amazing in just bridging the gap between what we're willing to do and what we should be doing to be more free. And I'm getting so fucking existential. It's topical now. I've had too much to drink. But you know what I mean? Like, just the idea of fear wrapped up in someone expressing themselves fully is not new, is it?
And you bring that point up, and then we need to jump to the music, because I know Brandon's chomping at the bit. He's like, music, you said it. I think
he ate the bit about half an hour ago. He's choking on the bit.
I think what it comes down to, Gemma, is exactly what you said. It's not just the fear. I think it's also the idea of, once those confinements are gone, if someone is saying like, go express yourself, it's that fear of, what do you do once you now are unrestrained and you can dance, you can have fun, you can listen to this type of music? Does it make you question what you'd been raised to believe in, or the community you were raised around to understand that they're wrong? I mean, there are religious organizations, churches, that make music a heavy part of their services.
Yeah. And
there are
I
places-
don't see the difference. What's
No,
the
no,
difference
it's no-
between a
no
dance or like singing a gospel hymn or losing yourself in,
Mhm.
reading from the Bible, whatever? It's the same thing. It's all ritualistic. It all allows you access to kind of whatever ideology you're trying to tap into. So
Right.
it's so funny, isn't it, that people are afraid of and prudish about new forms of music or whatever. But they don't really see that what they're doing is no different to what we've been doing for generations, was just trying to access something a bit beyond us.
I would say, though, touching on the dancing, they also do show they almost start off with showing the power that it has, and that it, like, if you're Olga, you're not a fan of the dancing because it literally kills her. Like, it's not, like they immediately go into, you see her audition, and then after the audition, when she's given the lead, or she assumes the lead role, she's bound, and she does it on her own, and she's bound to Olga, and this weird marionette kill scene,
which was very cool.
Very cool.
Mhm.
But like immediately showing the power that these witches have in their dance, which I thought was awesome.
And their physicality. I watched that scene first on my mobile phone because I was like in bed or something watching it, and then it started to unfold, and I was like, no, I need to watch this on a wide screen, because you really did need to see this woman in a mirrored room being absolutely ripped to shreds.
Just
and I don't know whether they used a contortionist or whether it was prosthetics or whatever, but like the leg kind of crossed over the spine and the arm behind the neck, and it was so gross. And then there's that moment where her face is pushed against the mirror and her jaw splits. It's so grim and so satisfying as well to watch.
But it was, I thought it was so cool how, as when she throws her arms across her body, Olga goes flying across the room and slams into the wall. It's like this super, it's as far as the movie goes, that's some of the most powerful magic you get to see is during that dance. If you'd call that magic, I guess.
Right. It works for me. You've got someone who's in control of the other person's body through their movements. It works. But Brandon, talk to us about the music in this film.
Oh boy. So I guess I'll start with, I am biased. I'm a big Thom Yorke fan. I'm a big Radiohead fan. And so I was curious coming into this movie because it felt like, I've been working in horror and with the No Sleep podcast for like 8 years now. And so I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Thom Yorke is kind of coming into my world, it felt like. And part of me was hoping he would do a really bad job, because I don't want to just be like, oh, I like everything that this guy does. But after I watched the movie, I loved it. It's one of my favorite film scores. And I guess I'll start with, I think the beginning, that the choice to open with Suspirium, his song, where he's actually singing, and I was like, oh, he's actually going to sing in this movie, was it was bold. And it felt like to me a lot of the music was written before the film was even shot or edited together, because it all kind of feels disjointed, I guess.
Okay.
One of my favorite things about it, though, is, and this is kind of nerdier, but when they dance to Volk, they're dancing in 3/4 time, but the song Volk is played in 5/8 time. So it is totally disjointed. Like the music and the dancing does not sync up whatsoever. And I think that is one of the coolest things they could have done, because it really plays into this chaos, I guess.
Chaos is a good word. I know I'm butting in on your stuff, but
go for it.
I was reading about this because like I wanted to know whether he'd listened to the original score. So like when the director of this movie asked him to come on board, he said no originally, which I think he does a lot. But not because he's kind of too good for it. I think he thought he was going to do a crap job. And he'd been like on a really grueling tour schedule or something, and he just wasn't feeling it. But the guy just kept like pressing, and he gave in. But he went off and watched the Argento movie and watched the original score by Goblin, which is amazing. And so the Goblin main theme I went back and listened to earlier, and I wrote down like how many instruments are in it, and it's like a keyboard, there's loads of percussion, there's strings, there's like breathing noises, there's a bouzouki, which is like a Greek mandolin, there's Indian drums like tabla drums, and then there's like a Moog synth, and they brought like this like Moog master, I can't remember, Felice Goetze, I think, and they brought her into play. And it's just like there's a lot going on with chaos and a lot of different noises. And I think he was kind of inspired by that. And so I was reading into Volk, which translates in German to people, but also was interestingly kind of like a kind of cornerstone of some of Hitler's ideology in terms of like building a community of Aryan people and stuff, which is quite interesting. But like it uses something called cacophonic rhythm, or cacophony. And it's quite interesting that there's two opposing principles. There's euphonic rhythm and there's cacophonic rhythm. And the cacophonic is bad because it's just a big assortment of noise. And the euphonic is the kind of all the good sounds. I thought that was used really strongly here. Like you're saying with the discord between what you see and what's being danced and what you hear, like the disjoint and the odd rhythms. I'm not musical at all, so I don't know much about the time and how it's played, but you can hear it in your head. And he was saying one of the things about the original Argento movie as well was like there's a repeating motif, which goes on to the point he said where you almost just don't want to hear it anymore. And he borrowed that and used it in this music because you can hear that little piano sequence just goes over and over and over, right? Like it's really clever.
And it's done in a way that where, because it's in 5/8 time, it like, so, you know, most music is 4/4, you want to count it in 4. So since it's in 5/8, you're counting these, you know, 5 notes that are playing over and over again. And it almost, because of its 5, it's got and this is another thing, it's got like a polyrhythm to it too. So it kind of draws you back to like a 4/4 count. So
I don't know what a polyrhythm is. What's a polyrhythm?
So a polyrhythm is 2 separate rhythms. So if you think about a rhythm going in 4/4 and a rhythm going in, say, 3/4, you know, it's going to be 2 different counts, but because, you know, they're both divisible at certain points, they'll kind of line back up. So it does this thing where it's kind of, the music is very spinny. It's like spinning around you, and it makes you, and it occasionally will make sense, but most of the time it just feels like it's messing with you.
Okay.
And, you know, and it kind of, when she does Volk, the dance first, and he, you know, she says, "You lost the room." That's exactly how I felt listening to the music. It just spins around you so much, you get lost, and the bass comes in and it adds like another element that doesn't line up with the piano, you know, ostinato or motif or whatever you want to call it. And it causes that spinning, and you lose the room when you listen to it.
It's weird as well because like you're listening to these certain moments, and there's an amazing scene where Tilda Swinton is trying to teach Susie to jump, and Susie wants to stay anchored to the ground, right?
Right.
And that's where they obviously kill another one of the witches who can jump to kind of transfer her powers across or whatever. And you're watching her when she's got these new powers, and Susie's learning to jump and kind of fly, I guess. I wondered whether that was like a little kind of sly nod at witches being able to fly as well, like on broomsticks or something, I don't know. But there's something happening where she's jumping, and it's one kind of type of music before that, and then all of a sudden there's these synths come in as she's in the air. It's weird. It's like you have to watch it again, but it's just really unexpected. So you know what you were saying about like wondering whether he'd scored some of it first and then used it for this or worked it into this. I think the music was written for this film. I wonder whether his brain picks up on certain things we don't see, because Thom Yorke's brain works like really differently to everyone else's, right? And there's also the idea of like geometry with the witches, and they dance in a series of patterns and triangles, right? I wondered whether there was something in that was written into the music too.
It definitely could be. And I should specify, I know a lot of it is written for the movie. He talks about having to get Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead to help him write the actual score for like a choir and string section and stuff, because he doesn't read sheet music or anything like that. But what I mean is, I think like, I know one thing I know about Thom Yorke is that he likes toys. Like he likes getting new equipment and kind of fucking around with it without a manual and seeing what happens. And so it's funny because I could tell a lot of the stuff in this movie is done from a synthesizer that I actually have. And so like a lot of the tones and stuff, you can tell he was just playing around and trying to get these weird, synth tones. And I don't know. I think it fits perfectly. And I don't know. I want to know, did you feel when there are points when it's just tones, when it's just, there's no piano or anything, when you just hear the synth, for me, it was really unsettling. And
it is unsettling. It sets your teeth on edge a bit, doesn't it? I think everything in the mirror room as well.
Yeah.
Because it's overlaid with dance scenes and the music that they actually the Volk music itself, but other key moments throughout the film when they're doing dream montages or whatever. It does. You never feel comfortable watching this film, and you don't feel comfortable listening to it.
Right.
And because I know you know way more about this than I do, but we've spoken about this before. Thom Yorke loves to play with rhythms that don't make any sense. Sure. And there's another song that you told me about that I can't remember.
Pyramid Song.
Where even he struggles to play it live.
Oh, yes. Okay,
Which one is that?
That was videotape.
Videotape. So it's such a complicated thing that he's created that he can't keep time himself on stage. And there's an amazing clip you sent me where he's just fucking up as he's trying to play live because he can't keep to it. And I feel like there's some of that used here to kind of create that instability as you're watching the movie.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it's definitely deliberate, and even the hook. I'm trying to think of that. I'm trying to think of the actual track names from the soundtrack. But I think it's just called hooks. When they go pick up Olga's body, you know what I mean? When they take those hooks, that there's a new piano motif that plays, and it's just off. It's painful to hear those notes, and it's another example of him. It sounds wrong, but it's with intent,
I don't think there's a misplaced note there, is there?
No.
I think it's all something he's thought about really, really carefully.
Yeah.
Which is why I imagine he sort of probably diligently watched the original and then tried to, it must be hard to kind of do a remake score, because I know the Goblin score was really highly regarded, and it's just very different. It's quite melodic. That score is quite, you remember it, but this,
I think that's why it's so different. You wouldn't want to try to, do what they did, but be better. That's not going to work. So
you just have to do your own thing, don't you?
Yeah.
Apparently his teenage son plays drums in this as well.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite cool.
On, what is that? What is the song name? It's not Open Again. It's the one that it has ended. I forget. I need to pull up the soundtrack to get it. I'm terrible with remembering these names. But yeah, it's when the song that plays when they're talking about the hostage situation and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
What track is that? Actually,
there's one with horns as well.
Live. Yeah.
I like French horns, and there's a track with French horns in it, but I can't remember the name.
I know you like French horns. But I guess, I was going to say, I think another point to talk about them, I think clearly music was really important to this movie throughout the whole thing. And, it has the synth tones. It has, what otherwise there are tracks on here that just sound like a Thom Yorke song. It could be on, any album that he's released. But
I thought it sounded quite like King of Limbs as well. There's one song in particular on King of Limbs that I thought was real mood for this movie. I think it's Bloom.
Yeah.
It's a real similar feel to it. And
there's another polyrhythm for you.
I still don't know what a polyrhythm is. Still don't know. You need to do a real dumbed down version for the listeners at home as well. The listeners at home need to know.
If you want an easy Radiohead example of polyrhythm, Daydreaming is a polyrhythm. But I think at the end of the movie, which is, what we talked about first here, playing Unmade, possibly one of the most beautiful songs that Thom Yorke has ever written, while people are just combusting all over the screen. I don't know. It just, at that moment, I was this, Thom Yorke was the right choice for this movie. It just felt like it all came together.
That's a good thing with horror movies as well. The horror movies that get it right often there's a juxtaposition. We talked about that again in Midsommar.
Yeah.
With the ending of Midsommar, and the pyramid temple is burning with kind of asshole boyfriend and all the other people inside. And you pan back and you see Danny. I forget the character's name. Whoever, whatever
name?
she.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's her name, and she's wearing her beautiful wreath of flowers. She's the Midsummer
May Queen.
Queen, May Queen, and there's this incredible, like, as with the last scene of Hereditary as well, where there's this beautiful kind of choral, moving, like religious sounding, sweeping song playing, and then actually there's a headless corpse like floating up.
Right.
Like, it's just, if you can not juxtapose isn't a word. If there is a juxtaposition of the beautiful and the horrible at the same time together, it always, like, for me personally, it works so much better than like a straightforward score. Oh no, let's do slicey strings and big scary noises, jump scare noises. Like, it just, I love that you're hearing something so melodic and beautiful and all encompassing, and you're seeing such horrendous things on the screen. Like, it's an age old formula, isn't it? Like Apocalypse Now with beautiful whatever that piece of music is, while they're napalming. Yeah, and then napalming the shit out of people, and it's just like, it works, and it shouldn't, but it does.
It's interesting you bring up those movies, because I think when people ask me what are like my most recent favorite horror movies, it's always Hereditary, Suspiria, and Midsommar.
Yeah,
and
they have a similar feel.
They do have a similar feel, and that ending, it's funny because in one way it is a juxtaposition because horrific things are happening, but in the other sense, it is their victory. It is, the end of Suspiria is beautiful to them because Mother Suspirium is here, and she is here to take over this coven. She is in a sense the protagonist, and same with Midsommar. She is now the May Queen of this. I don't know what you would call the group of people in Sweden, but
the community,
and then and then the same thing in Hereditary, where this coven of witches, they won. They got Paimon, in a physical form. So like it's weird that all three of these movies end with in a sense of victory, just depending on who you think the good guy is, or who are you rooting for.
Right.
And it's about ascension, right? There's like a real theme between all three of those as well, like rising up and ascension. So like when Mother Suspiria kind of lets loose and appears, and she summons death, who rises up from beneath and like kind of doles out justice. And there's with Hereditary, there's the rising up of Paimon's kind of headless corpse of body, and Midsommar, kind of the idea of she's rising up above everything that's kind of happened to her and found her new happy place.
She found her new family. Yeah,
she did find, and it's about family. This movie is about family as well, and this is about Susie finding a new family. And Hereditary is also about family and familial themes and motherhood, which kind of doesn't feature so much in Midsommar, but is a very strong theme. Like right from the beginning in this film, you see when we're in Susie's home, there's a sampler on the wall, and it's got a quote about motherhood. It says something like, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's about a mother is not just this, and actually what it means to be a mother in this film. And I thought that the music, one of the reasons as well that the music is quite soft in some places, I wondered whether it was to try and, there are some gentler ideas here, and there are themes around like sisterhood and motherhood, and there's some tenderness, particularly from Madame Blanc towards her students. Like she's always, I don't know if you noticed, but she's really tactile with them. She's always hugging them and touching them and stroking their cheek and like mothering them completely. Even when she's telling them off, like there was a real softness here that I thought the music picked up on really, really well.
Well, I mean, the song that plays when, at the climax of the movie, the lyrics are literally "Come under my wings, little bird." Like it is the most nurturing motherly song I think Tom's ever written, and it's like this. It fits perfecly. Apparently,
they asked him to score Fight Club. Can you imagine what that movie would have been like?
Yeah, is that real? That's
true? And he said no.
Thank God.
I actually would really pay to see Fight Club with a Thom Yorke score.
That's so funny.
I can't figure out if I like that movie anymore. I've watched it so many times.
Oh, Fight Club?
Yeah.
I think I like it. I have seen that one. That's the only other movie I've seen.
Oh yeah, you don't watch movies.
There's 399 that are left on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don, I will send you the list.
Oh, please do. Then you can be mad at me. I'm like, oh, I haven't seen this. Why haven't you seen that movie?
It's not even funny. It's literally like every conversation, like, oh, this really reminds me of this movie. I haven't seen it. It's just like, why? What have you been doing with your life?
I watched Midsommar like 5 times though.
Yeah, but you can't watch the same movies over and over again. You have to watch other movies so that you know what else is good out there. It's like there are other people than Ari Aster. Like you haven't seen anything from like circa 1987 to last year. It's
That's
like,
my life. I lived it.
It makes me so cross. I had some notes here as well of other stuff to talk about. I was gonna make this isn't a musical note, but it's to do with, it's a movie with, apart from the 2 detectives, if you look at Klemperer as being played by a woman, which I thought was quite interesting, it's kind of a single sex movie. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really interesting dynamically how all the girls in the academy are part of this coven. Perhaps it could have been played on more. But women in single sex environments can be really hard work and can be there's a really odd dynamic sometimes between groups of women where they're very affectionate and it's all about emotions and, sisterhood on the one hand, but on the other hand, women can be quite manipulative and aggressive towards each other in single sex environments in a way that I think men, perhaps, I don't want to generalize, but I feel like men are more direct with each other. They might slug it out, or do you know what I mean? Like women can be very manipulative and duplicitous towards each other in single sex environments. And I think if there was a slight criticism with this film, I would have liked to have seen more of that here, and the interplay of different characters and different dancers between each other, and that could have ramped up the tension a little bit more, I think, because I think it would happen. I think they would talk about each other behind their backs. They might play pranks on each other. They might try and curry favor. I wanted to see more of that struggle for kind of Madame Blanc's favors, for example, and there wasn't really as much on that. It was quite in a kind of Dario Argento way. I don't know if you've seen many of his other films, but he often used quite young, almost illegally young, very attractive schoolgirls in his movies. And they were quite naive characters. And I felt like some of the women in this were quite sort of wide-eyed and naive and weren't perhaps as, duplicitous as they could have been. That was another thought I had whilst watching it.
It did almost feel like a lot of the girls at this school were almost like not runaways, or you know what I mean, but they did feel very young and impressionable,
like orphaned.
Yeah, exactly. And
I think it could have been fun. Could have been fun to have played on that a little bit more, and created sort of tensions between those characters a bit more.
I was going to ask you. You answered my question before I had a chance to ask it, as far as the idea of being manipulative to what end, but. I think the first glimpse we get of that is with Patricia, Chloe Grace Moretz, her character, and you get the idea that, well, where are these people coming from? And even when Susie first comes in, or we're introduced to Susan, I believe Madame Blanc makes this comment about and you referenced it earlier, as far as her not having any training and this idea that she came here, and my question was, you went there to what end? What is going to be revealed about you? But then there's also this thing of, is this a traditional, I shouldn't say traditional school. Is this I guess a traditional setting that these young ladies would go to because they were dancers or they were into dance? And it's, I really want to be accepted by this school because, you've played at, this theater, you played here, you've performed here, and I want to be part of that. And you never get that indication from any of them. But it almost seems in the same way that Susie is looking for a new home, a new family, or just a supportive environment. That may well have been the rationale for everybody else participating in this as well, including Madame Blanc. I need a family.
it makes sense to gather in kind of waifs and strays, doesn't it, as well? Because if they do then go missing, nobody misses them.
Yeah.
And it's like at one point there were like 3 mutilated corpsey girls kind of in the basement, and they've been down there, and it's like, well, the only person that misses any one of the girls is Klemperer, who reports Patricia missing to the police. And it's not like the witches can't use their influence to kind of deceive and to lie and to obfuscate and stuff. But it makes more sense that they would use them, attract people who were orphans, because at the beginning, Susie goes and they say, right, you're in. And she goes, well, I can't. They talk about money, and they're like, oh, no, you don't need to pay. We understand the costs and we pay for everything. Right. And she's really taken aback, and she like wipes away tears because she's obviously got no money. So it does seem that's quite predatory in that sense as well.
Right, a free room to stay if you stay on the dance team.
And I think there are links as well into certain, again, thinking of certain cults that I've read about where people are encouraged to come in and there's no money involved, and it's everybody shares everything, and we all eat the same food, and we farm and we share everything, and but then you find that those people are then trapped and can't leave, you know? Like, yeah.
I was thinking that because when you think about Madame Blanc being this mother character to all of these girls, but then she has no problem killing them. You know what I mean? Like, not necessarily by her hand, but she clearly is the one who orchestrates Olga's death. It's just this weird, like, you want to root for her because she seems like the nice character, but then, she's still participating in all of this.
Yeah. And the girl that can jump as well, she kind of clearly decides, right, we've got a higher power to serve now.
We got to sacrifice her.
Yeah, we're going to sacrifice. I loved the idea of them as a coven voting for who leads them. I don't know how diplomatic that was. And then at the end, that's kind of their undoing, because death then kind of explodes everybody who voted for Mother Marco. But I loved the idea that they have this kind of hierarchy and the kind of age-old tradition of just voting for whoever leads them. I thought that was quite democratic, actually.
Right.
Well, even with the voting, like I have, when I watched it and rewatched it, my problem with the voting thing was how much of that was sincere, I believe, in Mother Marco, and then how much of that was possibly the peer pressure, because you're dealing with vulnerable people. So is it a thing of like, well, I know that people want Mother Marco, so I'm going to say Mother Marco. And then finding yourself in that position of being damned because you went along with the group, or at least you went in with, or you ended up submitting yourself to the concept of groupthink. Like, I know that's what they're going to do. So, Mother Marco, she's the one. Let's go with her.
Right. Or even just voting out of fear. I mean, clearly Mother Marco is very powerful. She air chops Madame Blanc, she's a very powerful being. So it could be,
Was she in Mortal Kombat as well?
I mean, that's a fatality if I've ever seen one.
Is that video game terminology? I don't know what that means. That sounds like nerd video game stuff.
Wow.
I'm so dismissive, aren't I? It's just I'm actually jealous because I'm not very good at those kind of games. I have no reflexes.
All you have to do is smash buttons. That's it.
Yeah, I was talking to someone else about, I've just recently, I know this is a massive segue, but I've just, for the first time, like since I had a Sega Mega Drive when I was a teenager, like we got a games console for Christmas, and I started to sort of teach myself to play video games. And I'm like nearly 40 years old, and I'm coming to this really late. So I thought I'd go in really easy, and I downloaded Resident Evil 7.
Wow.
Nice.
That was a mistake.
Yeah. Nice and
like,
easy.
I am so scared playing that game that I cannot function. Like, I can't figure out how to run or move or shoot. I can't even aim.
Those are all very
can't.
important parts of that game.
They are so important. So I would be useless at video games like where you need to have really quick responses, because people are either like fight, flight, or freeze, and I'm a freezer. Like, I freeze. It's so funny. So I'm just jealous. Just ignore me.
Did you feel that when you mentioned earlier about her saying that she wanted to be pulled to the ground, that same scene, it showed Mother Marco like reaching up from like her dungeon for her, right? So it was like this weird, and she's being drawn to Mother Marco. And I
thought that was death underneath. I thought that was the hand of death, because it looked like the same kind of long clawed hand.
Oh, I guess it could have been that.
Which then made me think perhaps again, Mother Suspiria had been there all along.
That's what,
because there was.
Is that death or is that Mother Suspirium?
I think it's billed on IMDb as death.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with that.
Cheater.
Sorry. But maybe they're an extension of each other, or just really good friends. Like they hang out on the weekends and
they're buds.
Go to the movies. Maybe Death watches the films that Mother Suspiria recommends on the shared Google document, and then takes the time to go, yeah, that was actually really good. I really trust your critical taste.
Wow.
See, these are true friendships, people. True friendships.
Because there are three mothers, maybe somehow Mother Suspirium is more tied to death than the others. I don't know. I don't know who the mother of sighs and all of I don't know enough about the other mother movies to say.
There's a trilogy.
Yeah.
Suspirium 2.
Well, let me bring this up before I forget. There was that part that Gemma, I believe you brought up about Dr. Klemper, or at least when Susie or Mother Suspiria meets with him, and there's this conversation that takes place that I guess just gives us an indication of his story and what was going on, and this idea of guilt, which when I first saw it, I was a little bit confused because of his status. I mean, he's obviously he had been spared in the war and everything, or at least even under Nazi occupation. Nazi Germany, not Nazi occupation, because he's looking at his Aryan papers and going over them, and you're like, oh, okay, this guy wasn't Aryan and he was certified, but under the Third Reich and all these things that are going on, and it makes you as a, I would say, a casual historian, or at least casual understander of historian. And I'm not going to speak for you. I'm going to speak for the American educational system here, Gemma. I'm sure that the educational system with respect to Germany and World War II is a whole lot better than in England or in the UK than it is in the United States, because there's this misunderstanding that everyone was willing and going along with what the Nazis were doing. But in reality, it was kind of what you see with the Coven. Not to say the Coven is the equivalent to the Nazis, but it's the same thing with the Coven, where you probably had people who went along because they were afraid of what the results were going to be.
Sure.
So,
you understand that this guy just did not like what was taking place, understood what was going on, and wanted his wife to be safe. And he's searching for his wife. It's not a thing like, oh, he's given up and I'm not going to look for her anymore. He's contacting people to search for her, to find her. And there's even this diversion in the movie where you think oh shit, they found each other. And then you realize it's not true. And I was actually pissed off because I was sitting there you actually sucked me in for a change in one of these movies instead of me simply going she's not really there. She's not really
right.
Because I was so rooting for him to find her, even though I wasn't invested in his character. But the idea that there were people who fell victim to that because of their DNA, of their background, of their heritage and ethnicity, where I'm not going to be punished by the Nazi government because of what my background is and because of what these papers say. But somebody I love is going to be punished. So
right.
Even though they get out, they might not be safe. But that discussion that Suspirium has with him and in that room is, hey, here's what happened to your wife. She died, but she didn't die alone. She died with people. She died, and even then you have that sense of family, that community that gets created in that death camp or in that concentration camp, where there are people who attach themselves to each other out of survival to try and make it through, or to support each other in death. And in that moment where, she tells him this story, you get the sense that he's relieved, not because she died, but that he knows what happened to her.
Right. He's got closure.
Yeah. And then she removes it from him. He's like, this guilt isn't going to be on you anymore. And this guilt isn't going to be pushed onto us. And I thought it was a brilliant thing to add, even though they didn't have to add to it. Because I looked at some of the criticisms of the film, and it was like, why are you putting this political stuff in here? Why is it in this time period? Why are you talking about this? Because that was stuff that people were dealing with. And yeah, you do need to have a character like this, have that connection to both parts of the story. So, the post-war period, or the war period itself, and the post-war period, and the reconciliation afterwards, as well as the political strife that, some would argue that the Coven is taking advantage of,
Massively so.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really interesting what you were saying about education. This is completely divergent from the movie, but talking about like what we learn in schools about the Second World War and our understanding of Germany in relation to the Second World War, and not everybody being complicit in kind of Aryan philosophy and going along with Nazism. So one of the things to understand about how history is taught in England, or was in the kind of 90s when I was learning about it properly, is that everything is very much from our point of view. Mm-hmm. There is no worldview when we learn about Second World War, which I thought was hilarious. Like, most of what we learned about the Second World War was to do with the Blitz and cities across England being bombed heavily, and evacuees, sorry. And then we spent an inordinate amount of time talking about 19th century politics, and like the starting of the police force, and John Peel, and politics, and the forming of kind of our political system. But there was never really any mention that I can remember or recall of the nuances of Germany in the Second World War and the German people. And I think the first time I ever really consciously became aware of that, shockingly, was when I watched Band of Brothers, which is a phenomenal TV show that I rewatch every single year, which Brandon won't have seen because he doesn't watch anything. And it's like every movie star that's ever made anything of themselves is in this in some way, shape, or form, like in one of their earliest roles. It's a fucking phenomenal piece of orchestration and war filmmaking. And there's a horrible episode which is burned into my mind sort of towards the end of the series. And they're liberating concentration camps in Germany. And what they find is obviously shocking and disgusting and horrendous, and makes them all feel sick. And there are some awful scenes where the kind of the troops try to feed the inmates of the camp, and they're told not to because they'll overeat and make themselves ill. So they have to then take food away, which is just so traumatic to watch. But then you see a scene where there are people in a nearby village who had, they say they had absolutely no idea what was happening, Right. And you're never really sure whether to believe that or not. And what the American troops then do is they conscript locals from the nearby villages to come and help bury the bodies. And it's a layer of complexity that I'd never really considered before. And I think I hadn't until I'd sort of picked up an incredibly good book about the Second World War by a man called Martin Gilbert, who's pretty much like the Bible for historic information. And it just, I am very, what's the word? I was very moved by the increasing awareness I had beyond the education that we get at school, that war is a very complicated thing, and that there are no bad guys and good guys. There are obviously some bad guys. Hitler was a very bad guy, but it's way more complex than that. How many people were led along because of fear? Right. As with this, I'm a bit wary. I think that's why I was really wary of the Klemperer storyline, because I didn't particularly want to trivialize things of that emotional and historic enormity by talking about a movie about dance and witches. Like it feels slightly wrong to put them on the same level, but at the same time there are some interesting comparisons with going along with something because you feel afraid. And we all see that in elections, right? People vote out of fear, and then they regret it, and then they feel themselves really disenfranchised afterwards when their fears are unfounded. But I do some of the criticisms I also read on, and I don't think it was bringing in the political stuff that bothered me. It did feel a little bit like exploiting a Second World War storyline for the sake of a movie. And I see that a lot in movies where giant tower blocks are flown into by planes. Like, I get it. It's ingrained in the American psyche now, I think, is something you're all terrified of. And it's, of course, it's shocking and awful, but I see it used so much in movies where it doesn't really need to be. I'm slightly wary of certain things being used for the sake of a film, does that make sense? Like,
oh yeah, most definitely.
It made me feel a bit icky. Like,
that thought didn't even cross my mind. Like, the whole timeline and when it takes place and what's influencing it, I just kind of thought like, oh, this is what the original was about, and I didn't really give it too much thought about it trying to play on those themes for any other reason than this is the timeline it's in.
Well, I didn't until there was a huge segment at the end where it talks about his wife kind of, dying in a concentration camp. And I wondered how necessary it was to the overall storyline. I loved the idea of her showing her merciful side, but I wonder whether there could have been a different way, perhaps. I don't know.
No, it could have been done differently. I think the only reason why I'm okay with that is because you spent so much time showing us Klemperer, right? If it had just been, as I said earlier, if it had just been Chloe Grace Moretz's character comes in, complains about, or tells him exactly what she's seeing, what she's experienced, and we never see him again, there's no excuse to even go that route. Maybe there would have been some other connection to the I think Lufthansa 181 flight and the hijacking and all that stuff. There might have been something you could have gone into a little bit more detail with. But if you don't have Klemperer in the film as much as he does, there's no reason to even have a callback to him.
Right. And there's no reason, like, this was the only way that you could both have Mother Suspirium show that she is a caring character and also allow Tilda Swinton to be an old man for like 3 hours.
Right. Which she clearly wanted to do.
Right, yeah.
Just because I like being in makeup for 4 hours. Like. She is very cool though. I'd quite like her to like adopt me as her protege. I would quite like to be in a dance academy. Even though I can't dance, I'm just, like we said about video games, I'm just hugely uncoordinated. I cannot
just
dance
push the buttons, Gemma. Just push the buttons.
I tried and I kept dying.
Possible.
No, I mean,
Resident
just push the buttons. Maybe you'll jump
scary.
Yeah.
I couldn't even figure out how to run. So like, there's a scene in Resident Evil 7 where you're taken into the home of the scary, weird serial killer family, and I'm trying to run away from the evil dad. He's got like an axe or something and keeps. I just couldn't even run away. I froze so hard. I couldn't even figure out how to run. I was like,
is that when the scary guy on the PlayStation or computer or whatever you're playing turned his screen? Like, Gemma, how many times do we have to kill you? Okay. You know what? We're gonna open the door. We're gonna leave. You can have the house.
Give you 10 minutes. Because like the beginning of that game is just walking around an old house. It's kind of cool until all of a sudden there's a woman with a chainsaw and she chops your hand off. And then I was really wholly unprepared. I thought it was going to be this kind of nice, gentle walking
Resident
around
Evil?
Discovering thing. I know. But then I've been lulled into a false sense of security by Mila Jovovich, and it just isn't like that at all.
I did have that thought though after the movie. I was like, is it possible that Klemperer's character only exists because Tilda Swinton wanted to do it?
I think so. I do feel like that.
I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, they found a use for that character, but a lot of it is kind of fluff.
It's funny, they gave him a name as well. They gave him his name was Erland Ebersdorf. Like they set up this whole persona and everything. Hilarious. And they were just going to run with it until somebody ratted them out, but they were just going to see how far they could push it. Like a big prank kind of thing, which it's just this. Yeah, I can totally see her her masterminding that. And
I can see her drinking a coffee or a tea while she's being interviewed about it. I'm like, well, what about this? It's like, yeah, we lost him right after production.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what she wanted. She wanted to imply that he died during the editing process, and
No one's seen him since.
And no one's seen him since.
He was a rare talent.
Yeah, he's great.
But he was like, he'd never been in any other movies before, so that was like his only movie. It was like his breakout movie at the age of 87 or something.
Here's what would have really bothered me. What if the role had been done so well by Tilda Swinton that the fake actor that they credited was then nominated for and won an award?
Yeah, I would have loved that.
Or he actually became like
Tilda
a physical
Swinton.
Manifestation of himself.
He's become so well known that Tilda Swinton has to be the one that retires and goes away and has to live the rest of her life as this guy.
And she's there in the audience of the Oscars going, that's my fucking award, bitch. This is not how I saw this playing out. I love that. It's a whole movie in itself. Yeah, that's an amazing movie in itself, right? Like this beast, this creature I have created, what have I become?
That's a new adaptation of Frankenstein.
Yeah. I love that.
Let's write it, Gemma. Let's write it.
Yeah, let's do it. I might need to make some time for all the other things I've got to do. But
we got time. We're still in quarantine. You'll be fine.
Oh, don't say it. Don't say it. You said it. You brought
just sucks the wind right out of my sails.
You just brought the Q word into play, Don. That's it. You just reminded us all of the world outside this cozy little trio.
Well, and you know what, you brought it up, not that but you brought up the idea of, since we're talking about Klemper and the fake actor. I mean, I guess that's our way of realizing that there is a world outside. I mean, just by talking about quarantine, is realizing that there's a world outside of whatever we're dealing with. And there are problems that people outside of our rooms, our collective rooms, are dealing with, and that's one thing I think gets represented, not necessarily through Klemperer, but through the media, the TV reports, the radio, things like that.
Yeah,
you're reminded that there's something else out there that's chaotic.
Yeah, and
even though the dances themselves and the music itself give you that sense of I don't even want to say chaos, but they're unsettling, right? As far as the movements, the even when it's synchronized, the movement is synchronized, it still is a little bit unsettling because it's done so well. But then the movements themselves, even at the end when they're all in the cellar, the basement, the way that people's bodies are contorted is still so unsettling that you've got the chaos, or I should say the comfort that's inside that building that really is just chaos. But then you've got that comfort, that comfort from the outside world that is full of chaos, which I think is a great thing that they hit on intentionally or unintentionally, because it makes you realize that when you do find that right group, they don't give two shits about anything that's going outside of that dance company. I mean, I don't remember them mentioning anything else that's going on in the world.
They barely leave, only to go and have dinner, right? Yeah. They go and have dinner every now and then, and otherwise, maybe because it's always fucking raining though. That was the other thing I noticed about the movie. It's always raining in Berlin, like always, or it's snowing once, I think. But it does feel that I thought that was deliberate because it kind of keeps them inside. Mm-hmm. But funnily, like the dance academy, it feels insular, but it's also, there are loads of hidden rooms and bigger spaces than you realize. It's bigger than it seems from the outside, which I thought was quite interesting as well. Like the mirrored room is a really good example, but there's all these underground spaces. There's the stage room, there's the kitchen, there's the big room where they have the blood fest orgy, and it's just it's an interesting space, the academy. I loved the idea of different spaces, that different rooms that they move between, because it stopped it being a bit too static, like a stage play, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Scare Me was essentially a stage play on film, but it allowed more sense of movement, I think. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, yeah, and when you've got that many people, you do need to have more space so that you don't feel like they're being confined. Whereas Scare Me, you had 3 people at the most in that cabin. But it seems like the story itself made everything so much bigger to where you didn't feel as though you were in a cabin.
Yeah, your imagination goes. But then again, like bringing it back to this, I think that's what the music does for this film.
Yes.
Like, so going back to kind of Olga's death in the mirrored room, like, you know, she's kind of covered in gooey snot or whatever it is that's coming out of her. Like, she's kind of contorting and like she's peeing herself. Her jaw's all broken and split, and in the background there's this lovely muted piano like going on, and it's that your brain is kind of led slightly away from what's happening to her physically, and more to the music and the dancing that's happening with Susie and you and the bigger picture. I thought it was really clever, like how that was done. That
brings us to the end. If people liked Suspiria, what are some films that either one of you or both of you, preferably, would recommend that somebody watches, either that are in the same vein or just something that makes you think of that this film made you think of?
You can go ahead, Gemma.
Thanks.
I'll just read them off the list you sent me anyway.
I was going to say, don't ask Brandon. He hasn't seen anything. I am going to make Brandon feel quite bad at the moment. There was a short film that he kind of asked me to watch a couple of years ago or a year ago, and I was quite resistant to it to begin with. And he was like, you need to watch it. And it's a Thom Yorke short called Anima. And it's very similar in terms of the music and the feel, but it's much more hopeful. It's a more hopeful piece about meeting someone and falling in love and kind of that journey. But it's quite abstract and it's very dance based. And there's maybe like 3 or 4 acts in the whole thing. Not much. It's not very long at all. It's interesting. It's an interesting parallel, I think, to this film, and like a nice extra thing to watch after Suspiria, I would suggest. And then I think really should probably recommend the original, which I haven't seen, but which I understand is very, very good as well, and in different ways. So,
all right, Brandon, what about you?
I'll touch on what we said earlier, that I think this movie goes along with Hereditary and Midsommar really well. Very similar vibes. And I'd also like to throw in The Lighthouse.
Okay.
I think that's a bit more different, but it kind of gives the same kind of like, it's like a very like artistically shot film, and it kind of gives me a similar vibe to Suspiria.
Well, I'm going to ask you this to follow up. Since music is your thing, what are some films or film scores that you would say are if someone liked what they had in this film, or what was experienced in this film, what would you recommend?
Oh, I think along with what we said earlier, I think the music is what also sticks out for me with Hereditary and Midsommar. There's something about, and it's funny, they're all 3 by different composers, but they all have this same kind of tone or feeling to it. And it's so unique. The Lighthouse is a bit different because it's mostly like horns and like literal foghorn sounds and that kind of stuff. But just that very unique synth-based type of score, Hereditary and Midsommar, they just kill it.
Okay. Let's see. I've got a couple, and I know, James, when he hears this, he's going to be like, "Oh, you didn't give me 20 movies. What's going on?"
I'm not helping the case that I've seen a lot of movies, am I?
No.
Recommending.
No.
Also, James isn't here, so we could just, let's break the rules.
So let's see. Pan's Labyrinth, I've got as far as the artistic representation that's there, and even the soundscape. You already mentioned Midsommar and Hereditary, but I would also say The Ritual, which involves the aspects of witchcraft and mythology. We mentioned The Witch already. Strangely enough, hear me out. The Hours with Nicole Kidman. Oh my gosh, now I forgot everybody else. Julianne Moore.
Isn't Meryl Streep in that as well?
And Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
But it's a very good film that shows the connections across generations between women. The Lives of Others was I believe it was a German-made film.
I've seen that. It's very good.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You feel so sympathetic for the Stasi guy who's listening to all these people's conversations because he's like,
that needs to go on the list. Actually, I'm going to add that to the list because that's a phenomenal movie.
I I watched it for a class probably a decade ago, and I was like,
yeah,
wow, this guy. And I realized then I think that the main actor died in a car accident or something.
Oh no, really? Oh gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he died not too long after the movie came out.
Oh wow, okay.
And just because I'm this kind of person, and then I'll end it with some serious ones. Footloose and Flashdance, either one of those films for the dancing.
Okay, you've lost me now.
Footloose.
No.
You've lost me now.
Gemma,
no, that's it. Sorry,
Gemma?
Don, I'm getting very cross now.
I was going to bring up Footloose earlier when you were talking about people not allowing dance.
And that was what I was going to get to. That's why I bring up Footloose, Gemma, because of the whole idea about controlling and religious indoctrination. Yep. And this idea that this local preacher, local minister does not want petitions for the original, not the remake. Petitions for the town not to have any dancing because it's going to injure kids. But there's also that idea of they're going to be sexually provocative.
Right.
But to win Gemma back, I have the Crucible and Three Sovereigns for Sarah.
The Crucible is an amazing piece of work. Mm-hmm. It's Daniel Day-Lewis, and I would die for Daniel Day-Lewis, and I stand by that statement, Daniel. If you're listening, I'm married, but I'm sure we could work on it. We could work something out. My husband's pretty fed up with me anyway at the moment after a year in quarantine. So I think I'm going to add Don't Look Now as well for the slight abstract feel that you get with this film. But I mean, it's very different in the sense that it's very firmly rooted in Venice, and there's a sense of place and mystery and intrigue. But there are some real trippy sequences that really reminded me of some of the dream sequences in this movie. And the music is also very jarring because there's that horrendous opening scene with Donald Sutherland where he sees his daughter in the pond, but the music playing around it doesn't really match up with what's happening. Again, it's quite a similar feel in that sense, and it's also contemporaneous with like when this film is set. It's like a 70s movie, and it sort of ties in with that whole Argento vibe, that original Argento vibe as well. Everything was a bit glary and a bit clashy and a bit strange in the 70s, you know, like a bit slightly experimental.
Just to even connect a couple more, I think stylistically it's not too similar, but what is it? You Were Never Really Here.
I still haven't seen that.
It's another Amazon Studios movie, which is scored by Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead, not Thom Yorke. But it's like, so there are similarities with the music just because, you know, those two have worked together for so long. And then to tie it even further, Johnny Greenwood also scored We Need to Talk About Kevin, or what is it called? Is that the title?
Yeah, We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is just, you know, sometimes you watch something and then it stays with you for a really, really long time. And it's interesting, when I was pregnant with my son, I had a sudden craving to watch that film, and I don't know why, because it's the most horrendous thing to watch while you're pregnant with a boy. But I wonder whether there was a part of me that was kind of aware of the idea of we need to be responsible for the men that we nurture and bring up, and how we bring them up properly. And with any child, there's obviously that onus, but sometimes, particularly in modern society, you do feel as a mother like, I need to teach my son the value of not being aggressive and not being violent. And I when I read the book originally, I obviously didn't have a kid, and then I reread it with a kid. It absolutely destroyed me, and I felt the need to watch the film. And it's just, if anything could be an exercise in slow escalating horror and dread, that movie does it. It's a masterclass. It's the most painful movie. It
gutted me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode. Of course, Brandon, Gemma, I want to thank you both for being on. Where can people find the two of you? Social media, websites, personal appearances. I kid.
You say that, but Brandon's been on tour with the No Sleep podcast. He I was lucky enough to join them in Stockholm in January of last year, just before the pandemic.
Just before, yeah.
And there was a European tour that went around the UK and finished in Stockholm. I think it was a sellout theatre to like 700 people. And it was one of my scripts, and then there are voice actors on stage that perform it, and Brandon does live music on stage. So you can probably see him play live at some point in the future if No Sleep do tour again, which would be nice. Yeah, he's been missing it.
Oh, trust me, I'll be there.
But they go across the US mostly once a year, don't you? When there isn't a pandemic, you do the States. And
we do a whole state tour.
Sorry, I totally just talked over you and like... So I'll go first. Okay,
of course,
so because, why not?
I wasn't going to try.
He's learned. You can find me. Okay, so you can find my books on Amazon at the moment. That may change in the future, hopefully. I've got about 5 or 6 books available now that you can purchase. One of them, of which was Bram Stoker Award nominated, and is probably my most popular novel. That's still doing pretty well out there in terms of reviews and sales and stuff. You can find me on... Many of my stories have been adapted by the No Sleep podcast, so you can just jump onto their website and pop my name in the search bar, and there's a list of them will come up. I think I'm up to about 20 stories so far, or 17 stories. And if you pay attention over the next month or two in particular, you might see something very exciting happen, or you may or may not, because I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say. You can also find me on Shadows at the Door, where I sort of write the odd script and voice act a little bit. I'm also the co-creator alongside S.H. Cooper, who many of you will know, of a horror comedy podcast called Calling Darkness, which stars Kate Siegel, and we're about to write series 2 of that, which I need to do. And I'm on social media in a variety of different platforms. If you just search for Many Little Words or my name, you can find me. I've also got a short film, not feature. I'm not good with the terminology yet. I've got a short film upcoming that I co-wrote with a friend called A Basement, that is in post-production now, I think. And there'll be more information about that soon, which is very exciting. It's the first sort of script that I've worked on. And a couple of video games and things. So, yeah.
All right, Brandon, where can we find you?
Sorry, did I bore you?
No, I was just thinking about you running away in Resident Evil 7 when you said...
Oh, shit. No, sorry. I need to say one more thing. I'm really, really sorry. I need to also mention 6 Rooms, which is coming out from Cemetery Gates Media in the next couple of months. And it's a haunted house novel.
Ooh.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, you can find a podcast I wrote the theme music for called Calling Darkness. There's a film coming out called A Basement that I'm meant to be working now. There's
a video game.
There's a video game where we're working on together. It's a lot of our paths cross a lot, unfortunately. And
it's really fucking annoying. I keep trying to shake him off, but
if you listen to the music,
stone stuck in my shoe.
If you listen to the music accompanying Gemma's stories on the No Sleep podcast, that's me. So No Sleep podcast is where I am usually spending my time. I have a Twitter at Wondrous Sound, Instagram at Brandon Boone Music. Keep an eye out for episode 2 of Scarlet Hollow. Keep an eye out for Realm Weaver, and and all the stuff.
You're so bad at this. You are so bad at this. Okay, so he has a YouTube channel as well with all of his music on, and he has Bandcamp, which has got 7,000 free tracks for people to listen to of incredibly good, atmospheric, creepy music, which is also very good if you're a horror writer and you need something to write to that's lyricless or mood based. You're just
this is the most Gemma thing ever, because I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm doing pretty good. I'm naming my social media, I'm naming projects, and then Gemma's like, oh, here's how bad you did. Mention Brandon Boone.
That's the sign of a good friendship.
He has a website. He didn't even tell you his website.
Brandon Boone, composer.com.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, it's she wasn't kidding. There are over 5,000 pieces of music on my Bandcamp. That's all free to stream. And YouTube, I've been putting more stuff up there, and accompanied by art by Gemma occasionally.
Occasionally, when he deems it worthy. There's also a couple of short films which are very, very cool. Stop motion pictures.
That's true. Yeah.
By a very talented artist called Hassani Walker, which Brandon scored. One of them is called The Christmas Visitor, and it's like a 3-minute short about it's a spooky Christmas thing. And the other one is a kind of and then the other one is a sci-fi. And the music for Starcrossed, which is this kind of little sci-fi short, is incredibly good and very moving.
Thank you, Gemma.
So you need to check it out.
I also have albums on Spotify, Apple Music, and all that stuff, and we'll have a few more coming out this year.
There we go. See, we got there in the end, didn't we? Jesus,
and she didn't even ask for 10%.
No, I do. Well, I'll do that later.
Yeah, it'll be a DM later.
Pay me, bitch. It's my fucking money.
Look, that's what friendship and family is all about.
That's right.
One another. I want to again thank the two of you for coming on. And I really appreciate talking this film with both of you. Hopefully people who were on the fence about this film are going to check it out. Hopefully they'll check it out before they hear us talk about it. For those who have seen it, have some new insights into the film. Because I'll be honest, whenever we do whenever we do our episodes, it doesn't matter if it's a film I've seen 20 times or something I've seen once or twice. Whenever we have these conversations, I find out a lot more, or at least think a lot differently about the films than when I saw them initially. Again, I want to thank both of you for coming on. For those of you who are still listening, I'm still Don Guillory, and check us out on the next episode of the Necronama.com.
All right, I'm here. What are we doing, guys? Gemma? Brandon? Don? Did I fuck up the time zones again?